Um, I'm delighted to be here today because in the last couple of days, it's been so enriching for me to interact with scholars in different fields and in different disciplines because it's a way to enrich my own work. I work here at RISE in the Center for Technology in Teaching and Learning. We do games for education, but I've been working since my years as a doctoral student in computer science with scholars in different disciplines within the digital libraries and digital humanities disciplines. And what I'm going to do today is to walk through some of these projects in which I've worked in the past and how that informs my sense of ephemeral. I will also mention a few things about how ephemeral technology is, as I see more and more scholars embracing technology as a way to preserve or disseminate their materials. Briefly, the title, the first part of the title, we all are familiar with what happened a couple of years ago with the financial sector. So we thought about these big companies that been doing business for many years, strong, robust, they will be forever. Well, not so. And I would like to bring some of these ideas to, again, the role of technology. So I think we all use PDF documents, right? And what do we do in order to archive them in our computers? So we save them. What is interesting to me is that the icon that we see in the Adobe Acrobat reader is a floppy disk. Last time I used a floppy disk was probably 15 years ago. And I'm certain that probably students now, they have no idea what a floppy disk is. So this to me speaks volumes about how ephemeral also technology is, and in this case, how the use of this symbol to represent something. And this has important implications in terms of the role of technology. This is an image of a game called Civilization, and someone say yes, it's a really good game. Yeah. This is a quote by a computer scientist, Bjorn Strastrup, that says, "Our civilization runs on software." I think we see that from buying our plane tickets to do the hotel reservations, write our papers. This presentation that I'm doing here is because there is software that supports this. So pretty much everything that we do relies on software. And I found this quote extremely important for my work and also in terms of what we as scholars do in general. A little bit of history. This is a photograph of the first computer I used back in 1987. It was an Osborne one. Yes. And what is interesting about this is that I remembered a game. There was a text-based game in which you were presented with some questions and you will be answering to those questions, and that's how the game evolved. On the bottom of this slide, you can see that the new technology for gaming. So we have an Xbox, we have PlayStation 2, iPad, you name it. So I believe that 25 years from now, we will see what now considered the latest things ephemeral. I don't know what the technology is going to be down the road, but I think that we will be thinking in the same way we are thinking about this. But it's not just the technology in itself, but also the ecosystem that it creates. We actually not only interact with these pieces of hardware, but we also live in this environment. This is the picture on the left is a game Pong. I remember playing with one of my high school friends, and so black and white, no colors, and you see the physicality of interacting with the device. So you touch the things in order to have an experience. On the left on your right of this slide is the new Microsoft Kinetic interface, in which you don't touch anything. You have sensors that actually sense your gestures and the interactions, and the computer reacts to that. So interesting how the ecosystem in which we interact is also evolving. So what is to do with ephemera and with my work, with what I talk about digital libraries and digital humanities? In the next slides, I will talk about the different projects in which I've worked. The first one is the Cervantes project. There's a professor with the Hispanic Studies Department who was interested in looking at the evolution of Don Quixote's, the novel. So what you see here is an image of the 1605, the very first edition of Don Quixote, which is a printed book. Yet there are not two identical copies. So this is not a manuscript, this is a printed book, but not two identical copies. So the question is, what was really the original one? What was really what Cervantes wrote, since the manuscript didn't survive? So here on the left of the slide, it's an interface we created that actually presents the different. I'm not a literary scholar, so you will forgive my ignorance, but kind of like different states of variants of the text. So that's what you see with the colored text. So those are instances where there's some differences across the different copies. Now, this to me suggests an interesting notion of ephemerality, even within an object or an artifact that we believe to be permanent. There's some states, there's some change there. Another component of the Cervantes project was a large collection of illustrated editions, and this is the iconography of Don Quixote. What I found fascinating about this, working with this iconography, were two things. One was the role of the special collections library at Texas A&M, they were the ones who acquired this collection. They cataloged all the materials, and I think that on Friday there was some discussion about the importance of the scholars. So it's not only, I have no idea about what these materials are because it's not my field of expertise. However, with the technology, I'm enabled other scholars to augment, to enrich and enhance what is in there. But in terms of ephemeral, when you look at the different illustrations that span since the 1600s until today, you can have a different sense of visually reading the novel by looking at the different illustrations. So depending where those illustrations were created, what period of time, who the artist was, and what technique was used, you have a different sense of the novel. This also, to me, speaks of the different ways in which we experience ephemera, even though, again, that we are talking about a like a more permanent object, in this case, a printed book. The second project I worked was with an English scholar working on 17th century poetry. I think, Elena, you spoke in your presentation about falling in love with the artifacts that you were, well, the same happened to me. Not only with this one, but with all the different, working with different scholars. But this in particular, I remember again, the library, the Special Collections Library, gave the funds to the scholar to go to London and buy this cache of printed books and letters pertaining to John Donne. And how this scholar describes the strategy to buy particular pieces of this collection. And for me, it was like really, wow. The passion and really the love of this scholar for for these printed books. It was for me so inspiring. And it's some of the things that coming from a computer science field, for me is so enriching to really see scholars in other fields, how they really fall in love with their work. And that for me is extremely inspiring. In terms of ephemera here, these, I believe, are printed letters of Donne. And there are some inserts and some annotations made by whoever owned that book. That, to me, gives also a sense of ephemera, because on the one hand, we have the printed book, or the printed letter, as a more permanent. Yet what this scholar, what this collector, the owner of this piece, has been added by these annotations as like a new states to this particular artifact. And that, to me, also suggests this sense of ephemeral. This is another example. This is a manuscript, also of John Donne. In the zoom-in area, you can see that a particular word was corrected or was amended. Again, we can think of this particular manuscript, the original one, as something that is permanent. But even that action of correcting something introduces, again, change, this sense of ephemeral. And this, for me, has been, again, extremely interesting to, I would say, to focus on the work that I do, how I appreciate the different objects and artifacts with which I work. So from literature, then I move into art history. There was a professor who was studying Picasso. The problem he faced was trying to navigate through a collection of about 10,000 images of Picasso's artistic creation and 92 years of historical biography. So, and he was trying to figure out what connections were between a particular period in his life with another distant period. So this in itself shows the interest in different time periods that, again, to me, suggests the idea of ephemeral. And what we did from the technology standpoint was to enable different ways to explore the collection. So this is a timeline visualization. On the top there are all the different artworks, and at the bottom are historical events. So you can actually interact with this interface, and you can have a richer experience to better understand in this collection. So this is exactly similar to what you will see with the normal interface, which is basically a thumbnail gallery-like and a detailed biography on the bottom. This also, in terms of the different elements within a collection, this in particular, there's an importance with the different locations, geography. The previous talk was about maps. So there is also an importance of how the place where this artist, Picasso in particular, was living at that time influenced his creation, and the people he was in contact at that time also influenced his artistic creation. So this is a way to illustrate how technology can help scholars to do really new ways to explore their materials. And I'm sorry for switching from different fields, but that's what I've been doing the past few years. Eventually, I collaborated with some nautical archaeologists that were working on the reconstruction of ships. The photograph at the top shows a diver who is cataloging, studying and documenting the different ship remains at on site. And two things come to my mind in terms of ephemeral. I remember when I was discussing some of these ideas about this project with the nautical archaeologist, and he was telling me how at that time vessels were such impressive machines. Like they enabled them to, like you were mentioning before, in the age of exploration, to come from Europe to the Americas. That now we do in 8 hours in an airplane, but back then it took months. So, and yet you see them at the bottom of the sea, destroyed, rotten. Here what we see is a representation in digital format of that evidence. And some of the new avenues for scholars that technology enabled in this case was to not only have putting more context what the different parts of the vessel were, but also have some additional information such as other documents that talk about these particular pieces, and how documents in different languages also talk about these different technical parts of the vessels. When I was working with the nautical archaeologists, one of the problems they face was that this is a very technical domain, and there was a need to create a glossary to describe the technical terms. And this is an interface for editing a multilingual glossary of nautical terms in 12 languages. So we had a group of scholars collaborating in different parts of the world on editing this. And there was a Venetian scholar that raised the first issues with the technology. He said, I'm sorry, but I cannot match, there's some terms that I cannot match one-on-one across language. And the second thing is also, how do I represent the change of meaning in the terms? There are some terms in Venetian that after a few years, they have different meaning. And this to me was interesting because it really questioned my assumption about my approach from the technology side without knowing exactly what that scholar is doing. But it's, again, it's a fascinating aspect for me of how even these challenges, the importance of trying to find a common ground to advance the knowledge in this case. All right, so big change again. What I do now are games, mostly science games. But I would like just to tie it a little bit with the previous projects. I'm interested in the same way that we have demonstrated with the studies how games are engaging for science and for fostering careers. I'm interested in games to explore this scholarly collection. So someone was talking here about maps, about a particular historian and so on. How do I use games to get kids or people in general interested about this? So in other words, that doesn't stay just for the scholars, but it's actually the public gets engaged with this collection. And that's one of the things that I believe are interesting from using games as a way to disseminate these materials. But this is a game that we created. It's based on the CSI show, and it's about forensic science. We did an experiment. We embedded the game in a virtual world for teenagers. And what you see on the left is the forum in that virtual world. So how kids work, or how players were communicating about what was going on in the game. What I found interesting about Ephemeral was that I looked at this the latest comment is it's novel, is the latest one. But as people start commenting, that becomes ephemeral. And I have the same feeling when I, for instance, read the New York Times and I see the comments, how comments start become ephemeral very, very quickly. And so this again sheds light to the aspects of ephemeral. It doesn't matter what we do. In this case, with games. This is a very recent game that we launched on the iPad, and is to learn about pathogens and how to, what kind of medicines should be used for different kind of pathogens. And what I see in terms of ephemeral is the experience for me as a player. How do I interact with this space? That the experience is changing constantly. And that, to me, has also implications for creating these different environments in which we will present this information or these collections. All right, so, but there are bad news. Well, I don't know if bad news, but software is more ephemeral than what we think. How many of you have seen this? Yeah, all right. So I'm here for Windows lovers and for Apple lovers, so everyone is included here. But we see this very often. So we have to update our software, to patch our software, and that in itself is ephemeral. So the software is ephemeral, but yet we put a lot of faith on what we do with software. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but it's just to point out to some aspects of the ephemerality of the software. Also the vendors. There's impacts the life of software. This was a news story early in November. So Adobe, big software manufacturer, decided to stop providing Flash development for mobile tablets. And so the question for me is, well, what if I design and created my interface to explore these priceless maps for this platform, so people will not have access to it? And this is a decision for which I have no power, but it's been imposed by the software companies. The one on the other end is Microsoft announcing we are stopping supporting these two Windows versions. So I mean, what happens to what the stuff that I have created that requires these things? So this to me also has implications for ensuring long-time preservation and dissemination of materials. Lawyers also. What is funny about this is the morality of the cell phone, but this is a story about some patent lawsuits. And so what happens if there is a lawsuit that requires a particular things of software that has to be taken away? And that might probably impact what I have there in my collection. So these are, again, questions that I think are relevant in terms of how we perceive, how we use, and how we embrace technology. So some final ideas. I believe that digital preservation is essential, not only of born digital artifacts, the things that are created in a digital form, but also original artifacts that are then transferred into a digital collection. So so maps, we have books, we have photographs, and so on. So we have to think about how we ensure that these materials are available down the road. And I believe that this is not just the role of the technology. It's a role of everyone. Everyone has something to lose if this is not accomplished. The second idea is obviously that technology enhances and augments the scholarly artifacts. I mean, what they work with. As I was mentioning earlier, in the case of the Picasso project, the Cervantes project, new ways of exploring, understanding, analyzing different collections. The roles of libraries and librarians are paramount. I think that sometimes scholars are a little bit, and I share some of their concerns about putting all their faith on the technology. And I think what I just mentioned is part of it. And I think that technology is not necessary to replace the work of the scholars, but again, to help. In the case of some of the examples I mentioned, without the work and the expertise of the libraries and the librarians, these projects wouldn't be impossible. Geneva earlier on Friday spoke about institutional repositories, how an institution create a digital repository to ensure that something is going to be preserved and is going to be available in the future. And we have that actually with the games. We decided to put our games on the RISE institutional repository to make them available and have a long-term way of ensuring access to the games. Obviously, scholarly practices are more interdisciplinary. This has also challenges, but in my case, for me, has been such an enriching experience. Like I mentioned earlier, it's been so eye-opening for me. It's opened my eyes to really better appreciate all the different, not only the historical, cultural value of those materials, but also to appreciate the scholarly practices of the different people. Technology is ephemeral. I started by, as I mentioned, and this is something that is important to keep in mind. I started by showing the floating icon of Microsoft, the same icon. And now we are talking about that instead of storing things in our own devices, we are using the cloud. So that's the new hot word, the cloud. And the cloud actually, it's a very ephemeral thing. So the cloud is up there and then it goes away. So I wonder whether this is something that will have kind of the same connotations that using the metaphor of the floppy disk. So.